Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I have everyone muted, just so you know. You should be able to unmute yourself. So, I think the best way to handle this meeting for now will be to reserve questions towards the end. We'll do a run through of the background and history of the Summer College Credit Program, and then we'll do a kind of a deeper dive into the administrative rules that were proposed by the State Board of Education. And then at the end, we'll try to clarify points and answer questions that anyone has. So with that, I have Jeremy Varner with me as well, and he is going to start off by doing the background and the history of the Summer College Credit Program.
Great, thanks, Eric. So yeah, Jeremy Varner, head up the Division of Community Colleges and Workforce Prep at the Department of Ed. Hopefully you all know me. Eric will take you down the cut, but before that, I'll provide a quick setup. So thank you for joining this call. This is a program we're really excited about. This is all very new to all of us, but we hope to give you a good setup to get started with this work. And quickly start moving forward. Hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions today. If you ask really good ones, we might not be able to. That's okay. We need to know sort of everything you feel like you need to know so we can get your questions answered quickly, and you can get this program implemented quickly. So today the big goal is to really get you grounded in this program, what it's supposed to do, how it's going to work, break it down, talk about the timelines, what the expectations are, and then yeah, of course, answer your questions. I think that's the biggest thing. We'll try to move through this pretty quickly, but again, sort of jot down all of your questions. So the history here is the Summer College Credit Program was included as a part of the Future Ready Iowa Act. It's intended to support the governor's goal of ensuring that 70% of Iowa's workforce holds a credential beyond high school that has labor market value by 2025. So it's included in that Future Ready Iowa proposal. It really has three big goals, right? So we're looking to provide greater access to high school students, provide students access to college credit opportunities. What we heard a lot over the last several years is that student schedules during the regular school year are very crowded with all the things that students need to do in high school. They're doing band and extracurriculars and all of this. They often don't have time to put forth to participate in these very involved career academies and lab courses and these sorts of things. So providing access in the summer expands student opportunities. At the same time, we know that our community colleges and school districts together have made investments in facilities that are often sitting idle during the summer. So some of our regional centers and whatnot, or college campuses, we have equipment that's sitting idle, it's high end. This gives students an opportunity to access that when they would otherwise be underutilized. And then of course, I think the thing that our policymakers are most excited about is this is giving students the opportunity to explore and start pursuing a pathway in a high demand area. So supporting those occupations that have been identified by the State Workforce Board, and basically increasing the pipeline of students in those career areas where students might not otherwise have the opportunity to start exploring and moving down a path toward occupations that are really in need in your regions, right? So this is a new program under the Senior Year Plus umbrella. It was included, as I said, under the Future Ready Iowa Act, House File 2458. That legislation set the basic parameters for the program, and they're pretty broad. Ultimately, the legislature appropriated $600,000 for this, which is available for this current fiscal year, which is great. We know that isn't enough to scale the program to every student in the state, but it is enough money for us to get a good proof of concept and get the program going in all corners of the state. So we sort of have these pilot efforts that we can get underway and make the case that this is the right work. So the State Board of Education adopted administrative rules for this at their most recent meeting here in November, November 14th. So we understand that that this timeline now, just getting the policy now, doesn't give you a lot of time to get this program operational for next summer, but that is the expectation. That's what we need to do. Ultimately, the Chapter 22 administrative rules sketch out the basic policy, and we'll walk you through that in some detail. Here. I think the most important things to be thinking about is that ultimately out of this program, it's really important that the programs be in high demand areas. So think about at the end of year one, what we want this program to look like in terms of, us making the case to policymakers that this program needs additional investment to expand this to other students. So we need the programs and the offerings, the course offerings, to be in those areas that are most attractive in really high demand areas, and we need numbers of students, right? So you'll see in the rules, the policy sort of incentivizes enrollment, getting numbers over sort of niche or cottage programs, and we'll certainly want to see that really attractive results at the end of this. So be focused on those areas. So that's what I have for the quick setup. You'll see in the slide deck here we have the authorizing statute that outlines the basic parameters. And important things to note is that these have to be taught by community college instructors in a community college setting, have to be in those high demand areas, but otherwise, generally follows the same contours as the concurrent enrollment program that you're familiar with. So with that, I'll kick it over to Eric, and he'll take you down the cut in terms of how we see this program working.
Great. Okay, so some key components to begin with based on the statute that you saw on the last page. First is this program was designed to generally follow the contours of the concurrent enrollment program. So you're looking at much of the same requirements for students, courses, teachers, and institutions. Those all of the rules that apply to concurrent enrollment largely apply to the summer college credit program. That said, the summer college credit courses are not eligible for supplementary weighting because of the appropriation and the funding mechanism. The program is going to be available to students in grades 9 through 12. So we had some conversations about, given that this is the summer, we're not dealing with the regular school year here. When we talk about eligible students, we're talking about a student enrolling starting the summer following the 8th grade up until the student graduates from high school. Okay, so it's hard to put an end date because there's a couple of unique situations that can crop up, but so long as the student is not graduated and is still eligible to participate in senior year plus programming, they may enroll in the summer college credit program as well. The courses are to be offered during the summer months. For convenience, we are saying that is determined by the college's, the start and end of the community college's summer term. One thing to note here is, as Jeremy mentioned before, this program is funded based on a state appropriation, which follows the state fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th. The goal here is to spend down all the funds that are appropriated, and to do so, we need these monies all obligated by June 30th, which is going to mean we need course start dates that are in June. Okay, so we'll do a more detailed rundown of the timeline and expectations around start date, but just wanted to throw out that concept at the beginning here. We'll get to a timeline at the very end of this presentation. And lastly, as Jeremy mentioned, all eligible coursework must be aligned with an in-demand, well, the term is high demand occupation. And so what we mean by that, and I will update the slide deck accordingly. We got the statute here, so high demand occupation, that will be defined by the State Workforce Board and each community college. What you should be referring to in this situation is the list of high demand occupations that is going to be established for the Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar Scholarship Program. The State Workforce Board just approved that list at the last meeting. There's still work that needs to be done, however, in matching those occupations to programs and then on down to courses. But the Department of Education will handle that task, and will be providing that list of programs aligned to high demand occupations in the near future. We know you need that to act on. That said, because each community college can designate a certain number of high demand occupations for the region, you kind of know which programs you can work with and get the ball rolling with. But we will follow back around with that mapping document that maps the high demand occupations to programs. So for these purposes, what we mean by program is career and technical education programs. So this would include courses within those programs. We're looking at anything labeled as Tech Core or as a prerequisite for the CTE program. So that means coursework may include arts and science courses. We've already got that question. So yes, technically you can offer arts and science coursework through this program, so long as it is identified as Tech Core or a prerequisite for the CTE program. But again, the clear intent of this program is to provide greater access to CTE offerings, and we strongly encourage you to focus on that going forward and not providing, and less so on arts and science courses. And then one thing to note is prerequisite coursework. Talking about documented prerequisite coursework, what would be noted in your what's AS 28?
Right, in CurricuNet.
In CurricuNet, either in the program description or in term 0. So those need to be approved, cataloged prerequisites for the program.
Yeah, so one thing I would add on top of that is, so, you know, if it's like an A&P course as a part of a allied health program, that's going to be pretty easy to justify. What we don't want to see are like Comp 1 or Western Civ courses or those kind of things that would be more difficult to justify. So keep that in mind as you're looking at that, what the intent is. We want to show at the end of the first year courses that are offered in those really high demand areas that are technical in nature. They're giving kids exposure to the careers that are in high demand in your region.
Right. Okay, so once the target offerings are identified, there will be this process that we're setting up to evaluate these offerings and approve these offerings for funding. So each college will have the opportunity to submit a program proposal. And this will have to be done annually, so long as the program is funded through an appropriation. But at a minimum, the proposals must include information on the course or courses to be made available through the program, total number of credit hours, the start date and duration of the program, any additional support services that are available, additional co-curricular experiences that you may include, and then other facets of the program, like, for example, are you going to provide transportation for students to get to and from wherever this is offered? That's all possible. You can all wrap that into these programs, these offerings, and whatever else you want to include. For everything you detail in that program description, we would like you to outline the minimum required costs to cover those expenses. This is so we know, we'll get to the funding mechanism in a minute, but this will feed into part of the funding equation, which will be to fund, we call it base funding, which is funding for these proposals that you are putting together. The idea being that these minimum and required costs will be covered through part of the allocation for this program. Lastly, we'll want an idea of the number of students that can be served by this program. So we're looking at you have 1 or 2 instructors, you have how many courses you're going to offer, how many students can you serve given the program you outlined so far. That will include what we're calling a minimum enrollment threshold. And we'll talk about how that comes in shortly, but the idea there is that minimum threshold will be used for the second part of the enrollment, the funding mechanism, which is based on enrollment. So we ask that each college propose a minimum enrollment threshold for the program, but then we will approve that as part of the evaluation process for each of these proposals. So for evaluation, the Department of Education will set up a vetting process. The specifics of that are outlined in the proposed administrative rules, but really the vetting process has two priorities. One is we want to ensure that there is equitable geographic disbursement of these programs. In short, we want to ensure to the greatest extent possible there's broad access to these opportunities across the state. We don't want to see these clustering in certain regions. We really would like to see every community college have something to make available to high school students. In addition to that, we will look at other criteria such as cost factors, including number of students served and credit hours offered for the estimated cost of the program, alignment to high demand occupations, the inclusion of extracurricular experiences, ideally project problem and work-based learning opportunities, and then any other features that address and remove barriers to participation for students. We will evaluate those, and again, we'll refer to a timeline at the end. We have a pretty quick turnaround plan for evaluating those proposals. We will document that evaluation and provide each college with written feedback, and the college can then use that to modify programs and the programs in subsequent years. And then if approved by the department, the programs would then be eligible for funding. So there's $600,000 appropriated for this current fiscal year. And the $600,000, or whatever amount is appropriated, will be split for two different purposes. So this first year, it'll be split roughly in half. So the total, I'm sorry, I'm catching up here. So half of the appropriation will be setting aside for covering base costs, which we're saying are the minimum required costs that are outlined in the program proposal. The idea here is that we want to get these programs up and running, and we know that requires a certain amount of assurance that you will receive a certain amount of money, right? We know that you don't want to go in and contract with an instructor or whatever else you need to do to get these programs up and running without a certain amount of assurance that you will receive funds to cover those costs. If we went straight to an enrollment-based formula and you only enroll 3 students, you might not cover all those costs. So because we know this is new, we wanted to support programs in the early years, and this is our way of doing that is making sure that those minimum costs are largely covered up front. Any funds that are not distributed to cover the base funding will be distributed based on enrollment. So this is where that minimum enrollment threshold comes in. So any program with enrollment above that threshold will be eligible to receive money for each student enrolled above the threshold. But so how we're going to divide that up would be by the formula that's shown on the screen. This will require that each college submit a count of students following the start of the program. And we're setting a count date for the 3rd day following the start of the program. And that will have to be submitted to the department. We haven't set an official process yet, but it will probably just be an email. Probably a pretty informal process for a lot of this to begin with, at least. But we will need that information in order to calculate the second part of the equation. This is set up to spend the entire appropriation. Any money that is not obligated for this program will revert back to the state treasury at the end of the year. And so we didn't want to see that happen, so we designed a funding mechanism to ensure that all the money would be distributed to the colleges with offering an approved program. One thing to note here, just to give you a ballpark of how much you might want to think about in terms of the base funding. You know, the cost will fluctuate obviously from college to college, but you know, if we're dividing the total $600,000 in half to cover base funding, that leaves approximately $20,000 per college if we're dividing the funds equally. So if you want to keep a figure in mind when you're crafting these documents, that might be a good one. Not saying that you're committed to that amount of money or that you're guaranteed that amount of money, but that would be approximately how much each college would receive if this was divided equally, and might be a good place to start when you're crafting these programs.
Right. The one thing that I would add is, so you know you have very low risk getting started with the program. You're going to have the base funding to support. It's not a lot, but it gets you sort of going on that. You know, you'll get half the money will go out based on enrollment at the back end. So the incentive, of course, is to find opportunities where you can get more students engaged, courses that are going to have sort of more students. And there's also an incentive as Eric moves on to the next slide. You'll see funding is going to shift toward enrollment over time. So it may make sense for institutions to, I don't know if I'd say subsidize, but you know you're going to get some money on the back end. It makes sense not to focus just solely on the base funding, but to also try to get put resources into getting enrollment, because you'll capture more funds down the road, if that makes sense.
Right. So just mentioned, written into the rules is a gradual shift away from base funding to more of an enrollment-driven formula. It's a 3-year process until we get to 80% of the total allocation distributed based on enrollment, and 20% to cover base costs. So lastly, getting back to one of the first slides when we talked about the general parameters of this program, these largely are to follow the rules and the practices for concurrent enrollment programs, which means a community college will contract with the school district to enroll students in the summer college credit program. The college will make the program available to any interested school district who wants to participate. And students should then be enrolled using the college's standard practice for enrolling students in regular concurrent enrollment offerings. Concurrent enrollment student access and eligibility requirements apply to the summer college credit program. This includes, for example, not limited to this, but this definitely includes access for students enrolled in non-public schools and dual enrolled students. They can access this program to the same as they can access concurrent enrollment offerings. There's still the same expectation for notice of availability of program, working with the district, including this in the catalog and all that kind of stuff. Access to support services available to regularly enrolled students during the summer terms. And then the awarding of high school and college credit for successful completion of the course. One thing to note here is that any credit hours that a student enrolls in during the summer months through this program do not count toward the full-time enrollment cap for senior year plus. The 24 credit hours that's established for senior plus, these credit hours would not count towards that cap for the regular school year. Lastly, instructor qualifications. It's clear that these courses have to be taught by qualified instructors, and so the expectation is that state and institutional policies for the hiring of instructors is followed, and same with senior year plus rules. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the one point to note is though that these do have to be community college employed instructors. So with concurrent enrollment, often use high school teachers. In this case, they'd actually have to be hired. If you did use them, they'd have to be hired and paid by the community college directly. Okay. So here's a draft outline. We think it's
pretty final, but I guess it is somewhat subject to change. But Jeremy mentioned we're working on a pretty quick tight timeline here, so there will be a lot of quick turnarounds for getting this program up and running. So realistically, we're looking at January for a lot of this work to begin in terms of our work at the state level. So as we talked about, each college is expected, who wants to participate, needs to develop a proposal, and those proposals would be due to the Department of Education on January 11th, which is a Friday. So that time, we will begin the review process, and there might be some back and forth between us and the college to make sure we understand exactly what the proposal means and what the costs entail and all that kind of stuff. But that will happen following January 11th. On the 10th, the administrative rules are effective. So there's a unique, it's kind of a expedited timeline for the rules to some extent, but these proposals will be due just following the effective date of the administrative rules for the summer college credit program. By February 1st, the department will complete a review of submitted proposals. There will be a notice sent to each college of approval, and then that's when the colleges will formally begin program implementation. And by that, we mean that's when you can commit to hiring instructors, working with districts to establish those contracts, and then also begin the process of enrolling students into the program. And then by the end of the month, we'll calculate, it will be provided to us, but we'll finalize the base funding and distribute that to the colleges by the end of February. March, April, May, that's largely the work at the regional level at each community college to get this program moving. But then June is the next date for deadline. So as we mentioned, all funds have to be obligated by the end of June. So there needs to be a start date for these programs no later than the 24th. That's the last, for 2019, that's the last Monday in June. We needed to start then because of the count date. We need a count of students enrolled in the program on the third day of class, which would be the 26th. That would be that Wednesday. You'll need to provide that count to the department immediately so that by the end of the week, by the end of the month, we can calculate the enrollment funding for each program and provide that to our internal ops team for distributing the funds to each college. So again, we know those are tight windows, but those are the final deadlines that we have to meet in order to get this money out the door. So I'll leave it here, and we can now spend the rest of the time answering any questions. So you should have the ability to unmute your lines.
Does this need to be held at a community college, or could it be held at a high school if they had appropriate facilities?
Hold on. I don't think anything would preclude them from offering at a high school.
Right.
If the high school was willing to provide that opportunity. There's, it might be easiest to do it at a college location, but if it makes sense in your region or in parts of your region to do it at a high school, that should be okay.
Right. The requirement specifically says that it has to be taught by a community college employed instructor. I meet all the other requirements. There's no requirement around location of delivery. So if there's a reason that makes sense, right, that would be permissible. You will want to engage with your school partners sooner rather than later in the conversation to figure out what is going to make sense, right?
Right. So the idea, you know, in terms of making it easy is when you get high schools involved, that means they usually have to bring in staff that might not be working much during the summertime, which might complicate things. But again, if that's what makes sense, then that might be a possibility. Okay, some people are using chat. Is there a template for the proposals? If you really want one, we can make one. Yep, that we can do that.
We just had that conversation this morning about whether that would be something you would want.
Yeah, we'll plan on making a template. At the end of the day, the required components are all outlined in the rule, and we're just looking for a description around each of those components and the cost associated with those components. But yeah, if it'll make it easier process for you, we will definitely do that. Will I send out the PowerPoint? Absolutely. And then, do high schools need to approve the coursework prior to students taking the course? Yes, this should be handled the same way you handle the approval of concurrent enrollment courses. So this will, for this year, either be an appendix or amendment to an existing contract, however you think is most appropriate, but the schools will need to approve the offering like they would any other concurrent enrollment course.
Yeah, which is part of the reason you want to start engaging schools quickly, right? Is getting that in place. I think those require board action, right? So you want to start having conversations with them, not wait till the last minute to get agreement about what offerings are there. So even long before your proposal is approved, you need to be engaged with them and have a good plan for getting those agreements in place.
Right. Can you clarify?
Hi, this is.
Oops, I'm sorry. Hold on. I have one more question, and then is that you, Christy?
Yes.
Okay. One more question, and then I will turn to you. Can you clarify who is eligible to take these courses? Is it students who will be juniors or seniors in the fall of 2019, or can graduated students take these courses? So this goes back to students following the 8th grade year and any non-graduated senior, right? So for this current year, juniors and seniors. So that would still apply to this year. They would need to be eligible to take coursework through the district. Essentially is what it comes down to. If they're graduated, then they are not eligible to take coursework through the district. And let me know if that doesn't clarify that point. Christy?
Okay, yeah, couple of questions here. So you talk about wanting the kind of equity across the state and the different regions. One question I have is like related to our region. So, you know, we have 40 plus high schools, 7 counties. Can the program proposal that we put out there include, you know, maybe we're going to do a nurse aid course in Benton County, but we're going to do a welding class in Johnson County. Can our region's proposal include, you know, as long as we put in those other justifying pieces, can it be a few different classes at a variety of locations?
Yes, absolutely. And indeed, you have quite a bit of flexibility. You can even find existing offerings that you're making available during the summer to regular students and, you know, fill the open slots. You know, really, you can sort of set these proposals up in ways that make sense for you to maximize student opportunities and to meet your local needs. So absolutely, you could have different things going on in different counties, different types of offerings, whatever you think is going to be most impactful, we're going to be receptive to, provided you're meeting the expectations of the program.
Right. And the one thing to note is that we do have, you know, finite resources, right? And we won't know exactly how much money your proposal might come in kind of large, where some might come in smaller, right? And it might all shake out at the end of the day, but it's impossible to know exactly what that might look like. Don't want to restrict you from putting together a proposal that you think will work best for your region, but we just need to acknowledge upfront that large proposals might not be fully funded based on what else is submitted, right? But we won't know that until proposals are submitted and we see what everyone is thinking. So, but yeah,
Right.
absolutely, you can have multiple courses at multiple locations in your proposal.
And then when did you, I'm sorry, I hopped on a couple of minutes late. I had another meeting, but I know you said that the high demand occupation list is being worked on, and through our summits we've seen kind of draft lists of those high demand areas. But if the proposal's due on January 11th, will we have kind of that official list to use to make our decisions on before January 11th?
So great question. So the State Workforce Board adopted the list of high demand occupations. I don't know how that's been distributed. I'll check on that. I think the colleges have that, but the community colleges haven't made their own selections. They might do that December 5th at the president's meeting. I'm not 100% sure about that. And then the connection between those occupations and programs, we've got a sense of that already. I know that there has some of that's pretty straightforward. What I'd encourage you to do is avoid the areas that are on the margins in your initial planning. I think some of them will jump right out and be very obvious. So a lot of the in the early documents, most of the documents that have been shared around this about the high demand occupations, you've had a couple come on or off, but that list is largely not changed. There's substantial overlap with the KIBI grant program, the high demand shortage grant program that exists now, but it's not perfect. There are programs that are not on there, but I'd encourage you to focus on those ones that are pretty solid. But the State Workforce Board has already released they've already adopted their list, so that document is out in public domain. If you don't have it, we can share it with you. The community colleges will add on their 5 per region, and we will gladly help with the crosswalking. So if you have a question before there is documents that are out there about whether a certain program aligns with an occupation, shoot that to us and we can help. So as a part of this, we'll answer questions today, but you'll inevitably have questions as you're sort of thinking about this. Don't hesitate to ping us anytime and say, hey, does this program line up with this occupation? Is this likely to be on the list? Is this a problem? And we'll be happy to talk you through it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, there's a couple more questions that came in on the chat. So would it be possible to limit it to junior, seniors only? No, it's open to 9th through 12th grade students who are eligible to participate.
Yeah, so that's language directly from statute that the program is open to those students. Now, again, you can sort of, there's lots of ways you can think about how to configure the program that might sort of, end up being set up to really serve those upperclassmen, but you can't explicitly exclude 9th grade students. So if that makes sense, the language is pretty clear in statute.
There was a suggestion, which was a great idea when we're talking about developing these proposals at the local level, to prioritize the funding in the proposal. So if you're going to, well, even if it's one course, but if you're doing multiple courses at multiple locations, maybe prioritize in your proposal what you would like to see funded in case there is insufficient funds. We'll have to build that into the template, but that was a good idea to do that. Please share the workforce high demand list. Yes, we will soon once we know it's in.
Yeah. So what I think
shareable state.
Right. Yeah. So I apologize. I was out of the country last week during the State Workforce Board meeting. So, but Paula Nissen in our shop is our point person for that. She has some documents I'm sure that Eric can send out that would give the state list of occupations. That would be a good starting point. And the community college 5 programs per region. When those are selected, we'll be happy to share those out. And then as we approach the crosswalking conversation, we'll share those. In the meantime, as I said, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out and just ask us if something's going to fit, because you are taking lots of steps to go from courses. Often what you're talking about offering are courses. To go from courses all the way to occupation is sort of a couple layers of crosswalking, right? So So as you're, some of it's going to be a no-brainer. Right away, you're going to know, certain offerings are going to be, eligible. But if you have questions as you go, about something you're not quite sure about, don't hesitate to just ask, and we can talk you through whether, that we can directly tell you right away, yeah, that's going to be fine, or whether, you need to wait to see how that shakes out. I know that it would be great if we had the list there already and have it all resolved, but there are a lot of factors that are outside our control. Unfortunately, with the program design, it took many months to negotiate the program design up the chain from us with the governor's office. Once that was resolved, we were able to move pretty quickly. And as far as the selection of jobs that are on the occupations that are on that list for all the purposes related to Future Ready Iowa, the State Workforce Board made those decisions, and IWD is the point agency, and we had to sort of wait until they make their decisions before we can release those documents. So we know that puts you under a time crunch. So we'll try to be as responsive and helpful as possible as you guys design your proposals.
Right. Okay. The K-12 district wanted to provide transportation to the site. Is that permissible? Yeah, nothing would forbid that. Nothing would prohibit that. The transportation can also be built into the proposal submitted by the college, and you could receive funding through the base funding for that, if you include that as a minimum cost
right up front. But as you know, there's not a lot of dollars to go around, and if you have high unit cost, it's going to be problematic both for your proposal, but also going forward, because you're not going to have as much enrollment. But yeah, we give you a ton of flexibility in terms of how you set those up, and we'd absolutely encourage you to figure out how to, braid efforts with your partners and braid funding streams and find other supports, because if you can increase enrollment, provide good services, that's going to strengthen the program down the road, and ultimately you'll get more resources through this program as it becomes enrollment driven. So asking the K-12 schools to put some skin in the game is a good idea.
All right, a couple more questions. Students and schools cannot be billed, correct? Yes, correct. So the funding, the appropriation is to cover all costs. There's, just like in current enrollment, no cost to the student. There shouldn't be any billing to the school districts, because that is handled through the appropriation. But as we just said, if they wanted to chip in money based on the arrangement that you set up, that would be something separate. But in terms of cost of the course and all that kind of stuff, it should be included in the proposal that you submit for funding and be covered by the base funding and the enrollment funding that you receive. Who is responsible for textbook costs? Again, that would probably be folded under your base funding, or the cost of the course.
Can the courses start in May?
Does your summer term start in May?
Yes.
Then they can start in May. You just want to make sure you're clear with your districts about what that means for students participating, right?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Daniel. I was just curious. I know that we have a certain amount of money, and as we build our proposals, is there going to be a way, I know you said check in with you, a way for you to help us monitor the extent at which we're building it on as far as money-wise? Because with all of us doing it, going back to our partners saying we can't do it because we don't have enough money, I'm just trying to figure out how to manage that.
Yeah, we recognize that the funding mechanism is less than ideal in terms of it kind of limits growth. It limits how much you can scale these programs. You might not be able to serve everyone who's interested in being served by this program, right? There's some pros. provide some flexibility, and we know how much money we're working with, right? So pros and cons. But yeah, as we said, if you think about this first year with up to half of the appropriation being reserved for covering these base costs, the minimum costs, so a total set aside of $300,000. Ballpark, if it would split equally, is $20,000 per college, which isn't a ton of money, but it would certainly be enough to handle instructor costs and all those other minimum required costs. At least we envision that's the case. We think that's the case. But that'd be maybe a starting point, is to think of $20,000 as an idea, because we won't know exactly how much money we're working with until everyone submits the proposal, right?
I think, yeah, so you know, the risk is low in doing the program, in that you're going to get base support, right? Your proposal's approved, you're going to get some base level of support, but you can reasonably anticipate some portion of the enrollment too. So you're going to get something on top of that, but you won't know exactly the amount, and that's, I know, not particularly satisfying, but it's not a large program, so your institution's not taking a huge amount of risk by putting some funds into setting this up. So I hope that helps in terms of setting this up. Now, of course, the more risk you take, the better you might be long term, in that the funding shifts toward enrollment going forward. So you don't want to sort of be left behind by being too conservative setting it up. But ultimately, there's some local decisions you have to make with the design.
Yeah, and I do appreciate it. I'm just trying to better understand and figure out how to work with the 22 school districts with students that might be wanting to come into it, and only being able to let a few in. That's all. And so
yeah,
I appreciate
we recognize that might be a possibility this first year. And if there was a case where demand exceeded your ability to serve students, right, your capacity to serve, you would have to ration those seats, just like you would have to for any other concurrent enrollment section, based on your capacity to serve those students. Yeah, it's a possibility, but
it's somewhat likely, right? So I think it'll help make the case going forward, that, look, we're not meeting demand. You're not going to be able to serve every district with this appropriation. It's just too small. But it will be an excellent way to get something going in every corner of the state, in a high demand area, and to prove to policymakers and local stakeholders that this is a concept worth supporting that gets results. So it's a great opportunity for us to get this work going. But in some ways, it'll be unsatisfying that only some will benefit, and we won't be able to serve everyone because the appropriation is not large enough.
Right. There was another question that came in. Can hybrid courses be included? So I'm assuming you're talking about part online, part face-to-face. Yeah, it's possible. You got a lot of flexibility in how you set up these programs and these offerings and arrangements. So it's possible. Yep. Okay. Any other questions up front? There's kind of a tsunami of information, we know, and there's a lot to think about and process, and there's a lot to do in the next month, essentially. But as Jeremy said, we're here to help any way we can. I will send out this PowerPoint along with some initial guidance, and we'll also send out the list of high demand occupations, so you can begin working with that. Otherwise, most of you already know how to get a hold of me, but my contact information is up on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions, concerns, comments. Barring any further questions, we'll give you 10 minutes back, and thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.